In Mark chapter 7, Mark records that the Pharisees came and asked Jesus, "Why don't you and your disciples wash your hands ceremonially before you eat, following the tradition of the elders?" Jesus responded that they were more concerned about human traditions than they were about the commands of God. And as a result, they were exactly like the people in Isaiah's day, who may have said nice things about God, and who may have done very spiritual-looking activities, but in reality were far away from God. Jesus overturns a myth about the Pharisees. Sometimes people say that the Pharisees were too concerned or too careful with God's law. But Jesus never criticized people for being careful with God's commands. That's what He did, and that's what He encouraged other people to do. What Jesus criticized was setting aside God's commands in favor of human traditions, and the Pharisees were experts at that. They weren't very strict with the command to honor their father and mother, were they? But they were very serious about the elders' traditions. And sometimes those traditions had caused them to actually fail to follow what God had commanded in the first place. And many religious traditions cause people to do the same thing today. Human traditions about salvation and the church and worship cause people to fail to carry out what God has actually commanded. Then Jesus addresses the question more directly. And He says something that would have been remarkable to His hearers. He said that food, when it goes in, doesn't actually defile you spiritually, because it never touches the heart. And He describes the digestive process in order to prove that. What does defile people, Jesus said, is what comes from the inside out, because all the sins that people commit have their root in the heart. What Jesus says is that it's going to take more than just cleaning up some external activities in order to be right with God. We have to be right from the inside, which will overflow into righteous living. The way to do that is to meditate on God's law and His commands so that God can write His commands and instructions on our heart so that it will overflow into holy and righteous living.